Again, I'm hoping everyone had a great rest yesterday. And today we have pioneering experts in their fields to guide us through a new future with their invaluable insights and experiences. I hope everyone has a great, inspiring and fruitful second day at the conference. Without further ado, I would like to invite Leida Rijnhout, Chief Executive at the World Fair Trade Organization.
Hello, good morning. I have a presentation somewhere. Can someone tell me how this works? I'm not used to... Yes.
Ekranı değiştirebilir miyiz?
Yes, here you go. Okay, thank you. So, to repeat my name, I'm Leida Rijnhout. I'm the Chief Executive of WFTO, which stands for World Fair Trade Organizations. I will explain later what it is and what we do. So my presentation is about the role of fair trade enterprises, and I see them as a huge leverage for achieving system change, for achieving the SDGs, for achieving sustainability in general. Where it all began. I think it's nice to let you know that my background is, I studied anthropology, so that's my background. And when I was 22 years old, I went all alone to Bolivia. That was in the time without Zooms, without Skypes, without mobile phones. So I was totally on my own. And I was living with an indigenous family there for 1.5 years. So I had my alpacas, I had my llamas, and I was just participating in the community for that time. But of course, it was very impressive for me, but it was also for me a big learning school on how a country that is so rich of natural resources is so poor. So I think it's called the curse of of the countries that are wealthy in natural resources. But I mean, you just see it with your own eyes, and especially at that age, you are very open for seeing all these things and the injustice that happened. So for me, that was the reason to keep on working on this kind of issues, which is environmental and social justice. For me, I think even if I had several jobs in my life, that was always, let's say, the key point for me to work on, environmental and social justice. So I was quite involved in a big campaign, an international campaign about ecological debt. Because you know that the global north, I mean, it's very simple to say, let's say the global north has a huge environmental, ecological, historical, social debt to the global south. So that means that indeed what you see happening when you start to study, let's say, history also on this point and how resources were distributed around the world, you see that, that there is an active process of enrichment and impoverishment. It's not just coincidence that you are poor or living in a poor country or in a rich country. There is a human-made process going on where people are getting richer and other people are getting poorer. And then, of course, I was also one of the first ones that were very active in the degrowth movement, because that is, for me, one of the solutions. But we talked yesterday a lot about that, so I'm not going to go more into that. Then I worked for several years in sustainable development. I was one of the negotiators of the SDGs. So let's say sustainable development was one of the key things that I was working on, but I really chose from the very beginning to work on the strong sustainability. Here you see the difference between the weak and the strong sustainability. I think it's important to know because I think it also explains why we need to stop focusing on economic growth as a main objective. This one, I mean, you hear it often, people saying, well, sustainable development is the 3 pillars, the economic one and the social one and the environmental one. This is an invention of the World Bank, so that's already suspicious, I would say. But this is a kind of showing, I mean, in the visual, that if you grow your economic pillar, so GDP growth, you can invest in your environmental and in your social pillar. That was for a long time the kind of the logic of people that worked on sustainable development. I think still a lot of people are in that mindset. But of course, that is not the way. And yesterday it was explained several times that we are having limits. Not only ecological limits, I think we also have social limits. I mean, you cannot work 24 hours a day, so you have social limits as well. And then, of course, the economy is just very, I won't say, little, but I mean, they're not in the center. I mean, this is not meaning to say that they are in the center, but it's limited as well, because they have to be within the limits of the social and the environmental dimensions. Planetary boundaries, it's an old concept. I mean, it's not something new. And I think it's very important to say that from the 70s already, we had pioneers, economists as well. I mean, they're not all bad, that were already giving a lot of focus on the planetary boundaries and the limits to growth. I mean, the Club of Rome, the report, I think, was a kind of wake-up call for a lot of people, but also governments. After that, in the 70s, it was also for the first time that we had a meeting in Stockholm in 72, where for the first time, environment became a policy. I mean, an issue where you had to have policies around. So that was Stockholm. We had, 2 years ago, we had the Stockholm Plus 50 to celebrate 50 years of environmental policies, and well, we're still not there. But anyhow, but I think it's good that it's something that is already existing for a long time, and people who are interested in those subjects, I would really advise to read one of those books. Maybe not all, but at least one of them. And I would start with Silent Spring with Rachel Carson. This is one of my favorites. That was even before the 70s, I have to say. It's getting more and more recognized. I mean, you have the planetary boundaries. That's visual as well. You have the dotted economy that was explained yesterday as well. And you also, within the SDGs, you have this, it's called the wedding cake, where they also put the SDGs in circles. So they at least give in the visual also that we are dealing with limits. But for me, and that was, of course, the question, to talk about the role of businesses and trade to achieve that strong sustainability. So how can you have businesses that are also respecting and recognizing the limits to growth, the planetary boundaries? As I said, I was negotiating on the SDGs as an NGO, so not as a government, but as a representative of the NGOs. And a lot is always discussed on, especially in the SDG on SCP, the Sustainable Consumption Production. A lot is discussed about how are we producing? What kind of production do we have? And consumption. So let's say on production, it's always the question on how to make your supply chain greener, more social, whatever. On the consumption side, it's often about how can we change the behavior of the consumers. But what is in between was not so much discussed. I mean, that is what is very important as well. What drives, let's say, the overproduction and the overconsumption? What businesses often say is that the consumers are asking for it. They want it, which is bullshit. I think it's absolutely bullshit to think that consumers are asking to change your mobile phone every 2 years. They're not asking for it, they're forced to do that. So it's really, for me, it's the production side that is wrong. And those are the drivers for having that overconsumption. Only on advertising, because that is the way on how to manipulate the consumers, the citizens that become more and more consumers. They're not citizens anymore, they're seen as consumers. They're spending so much money only for convincing the people to buy more and more and more. It's not only the advertising, it's also the way the products are made. Not repairable, not sustainable. I mean, they're not lasting very long. I mean, if you buy something from a fashion chain, I mean, the t-shirts or whatever, 3 times you wash it and then you can more or less throw it away. I mean, so there is a whole thing around, and that is not often discussed, on what drives us to that overproduction and also this overconsumption. Something went terribly wrong. So this is a girl that made that dress for 60 cents. The other one bought it for $50. So that means that the CEO, and not only the CEO, but also the shareholders and everybody around him, has a profit or is gaining 74 trillion, I think it is in English, dollars. So that means that something is going wrong here. You can't call it fair. Zara is also the fashion chain that changed the seasons, the 4 seasons, into 12 seasons. So that means that they produce every month a totally new collection of fashion. So, of course, that drives also, I mean, it's also very cheap, so people are kind of attracted to it. I mean, a lot of people at least. So that means that there is a lot of overconsumption there as well, the so-called fast fashion. And what happens with that fast fashion? It is thrown away. This is the desert of Atacama, where every year 10 tons of fashion is dumped. And it's not the only place where the fashion is dumped. You also see a lot of these kind of dumping places in Africa, and it's often also sold as kind of second-hand clothes, which is just waste. I mean, it's not always useful, and it's also, of course, disrupting the markets of fashion, local fashion, in the regions as well. So this is what is happening, and of course, that's not what we want. This is often, and I know it's simple, of course, it's much more nuanced, but I mean, we don't have time for that. This is how the company works. I mean, the bigger companies. So they make a lot of profit, but where is the profit going? It goes to the shareholders, the boards, and of course, also the workers. In the best case, they receive a decent income. But even then, most of the profit is going to the shareholders and the board. This system kind of forces the business to produce more and more and more. And that then, of course, they also have to have more marketing, they also have to go for very cheap, because that's what a lot of consumers want or can afford. So that means that this, for me, is an extractive industry. And when I say an extractive industry, it's not only about the natural resources that they are extracting from the environment, but this is also extractive to the people. I mean, they're really extracting labor, very cheap, for making a lot of profit. So this is not sustainable nor fair. So what is the elephant in the room? And we have a lot of elephants in the room. This is just one, a big one, as you see, and even he's sad as well. I think, and I have to admit that I'm guilty there as well. After 20, 30 years of working in the environmental movement, in the human rights movement, etc., I don't think that we really discussed the problem of the governance of a business, the DNA of a business. We always discussed on how to improve the production chain, the supply chain, how to get your consumers, the citizens, aware of buying green and social and whatever. But I think the elephant in the room is, for me, the DNA of the business itself, the business governance itself. So it seems to be a given that having profit maximization is efficient. I mean, that's what all the economists, business economists, tell you, that it has to be efficient, because then you can go for kind of efficient production, cheaper prices, etc., etc. So it's a kind of thing that's just like GDP growth is a kind of, okay, it's there. You have to do that, because if not, you're not efficient. Together with scale, everything has to be on a huge scale, because if you go for a huge scale, the prices go down. Of course, on the account of something, but anyhow. Another thing that is a given is that businesses are owned and led by shareholders, I mean the investors. If you have capital, you can invest in the business, and that means that the profit has to go to you. If you have labor, I mean if you're a worker and you give your time to the business, then that's a kind of, yeah, well, you get your salary and that's it. But I mean, why would having capital being more important than having labor, I mean time to really do the production? So there is also something that I think is not not really right. So for us, also for World Fair Trade Organization, it's time for a business revolution, where profit maximization is not the main objective. Of course, you have to make profit. I mean, I'm not against making profit, because you have to make profit because you have to pay your workers, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's about the profit maximization, because profit maximization is often on the account of something, or the workers, or the environment. So what is important as well in the business revolution is that the environmental and the social costs are internalized in the price. The price that we are paying for our products is often not the true price. It's the price that you pay for your product, but often environmental costs, social costs are just outsourced to the environment or to future generations or to families that are in bad circumstances. But the profit is not only going to the shareholders. Part of the profit can maybe go to the shareholders, but not all the profits. I mean, most of the profit should go to the workers itself or to the collective interest. Where businesses are fully accountable for their acts, of course, so transparency. But corporate power is not bigger than governments, because that is not a problem. I mean, we also discussed it a little bit yesterday. It's about power relations as well. Why are the things not going the way that we want them to go is because the vested interests, I mean, the power that is often with those bigger multinationals, sometimes their power is bigger than the government. I mean, they just dictate the governments what they need to do. And they also blackmail them a lot. I'm from Holland. We have the Tata Steel company in the north part of Holland. It is polluting a lot. So there is, let's say, some pressure on that company to make it cleaner, et cetera, et cetera. But they say, okay, well, then we are leaving the country. And then, of course, oh, that's 4,000 jobs. So of course, you have to stay. So subsidize them to make their whole, let's say, the whole production more green, whatever. But I mean, that's just, I think for me, it's criminal to subsidize those companies to make their production chain greener while they have billions of profit already. Okay, where production chains are closer to the workers and the consumers. I think that's very important also for the business revolution, that we as citizens, as consumers, but also as workers, that we know what we are doing, that we are not just one little thing in the big machine, let's say, but that it's indeed you have connection with what you buy or what you do, where workers, producers have ownership of their businesses. And the scale, I think, is important as well. I mean, just to repeat with, to quote Schumacher, small is beautiful. I think SMEs, they do have a big role to play here. SMEs indeed have a big role to play. I mean, those are the ones that are creating the jobs. So those are the ones that are giving a lot of people decent income. I am Dutch, as I said, but I live in Belgium. And in Belgium, we have the harbor. We have all the chemical industry there. We have all the plastic industry there. We have a lot of, big multinationals there. But even then, in Flanders, 70% of the jobs are coming from the SMEs. I mean, it's not the big multinationals that are creating the jobs. It's the SMEs that are creating the jobs. Of course, it makes also the local economy, the regional economy much resilient, because it's diversified. I mean, if a multinational leaves, then suddenly they're gone. For SMEs, it's difficult to leave en masse. So you have a much more, let's say, dynamic and resilient local and regional economies. But of course, what is needed is to have policies that are enabling a good environment for those SMEs to do their jobs, because that's often difficult. There's a lot of paperwork done, et cetera, et cetera. I freelanced for a while, so I was a kind of SME as well. But indeed, I mean, you have to deal with a lot of problems and administration problems for doing your job, to have time to do your job. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to provoke this change? I don't have the solution, but at least I have some food for thought. For me, and that's also a personal, I think, a personal decision, I only want to work on system change. I do know that incremental change is existing and a lot of people are feeling happy with that. I'm fine with that, I'm not against that, but for me, and that's also after many years of work and frustrations, etc., I think that for me, the solution is indeed to work mainly on system change. Where can you put your energy, your work in such a way that it changes the system as such? So this is, I think, one of the many visuals on system change, but we use it also for our theory of change of WFTO. So resist is meaning stop the bad, divest from the old economy. You have the old economy, but just kind of try to get out of it, not changing the old economy bit by bit, but also trying to get out of that. Rethink the story, rethink the rules, and rebuild, restructure, so invest in the next economy, build the new. Of course, our members are all small and medium enterprises, fair trade enterprises. They are fit for purpose to build that new economy. So this is our theory of change, which is indeed the resist, which is mainly with the campaigning that we do, etc. It's the rethink, it's the advocacy work that we do, also the campaigning, to have the rule of law, to have other policies, to have the social change, etc., etc. And then, of course, where I see our impact would be, and when I say we, it's our members, is in the rebuild. Having businesses that are indeed truly made for, let's say, the common good as well. Making profit, yes, they are serious businesses. It's not a charity thing. They are serious businesses. They do create jobs. They have quality products. And of course, they try to find markets as well. But it's indeed rebuilding the whole economic system. Alternative business models are key. And again, we are not the only ones. I mean, you have more than only the fair trade enterprises. But of course, I'm here now. I'm paid to promote the fair trade enterprises. So that's what I'm doing now. But I know that we have a lot of like-minded networks that I think are doing exactly the same or more or less the same. So resist the shareholders' capitalistic models of the business. Profit maximization is often, as I said, on the account of people and planet, and it accumulates power and it causes consumerism. So that's the root cause of where we are in. Rethink the whole system. Legislation is one thing, sufficiency policies, degrowth policies. I mean, you have many things, and I think things are happening, but I think we should really focus on that and put the little energy and time that we have in this. And then, as I said, rebuild. It's about social innovation. In all the lot of negotiations I was in, or conference, etc., they were always talking about the green economy, technical innovation, product design, or let's say the technical innovation. But what we really need, and often forgotten, is social innovation. We have to restructure our society. We have to restructure our infrastructure. To give you an example, and I think it's an example that is often given, is with the electrification of the transport. I mean, what is happening is that a lot of policy decision makers think, okay, if we change all the fossil fuel cars for electric cars, problem solved, all clean energy. But of course, that's a false solution, because the thing is that we are then using much more lithium, because all those batteries and everything that has to come from somewhere, and that already is causing problems. Electrification of transport is okay, but I think what you need, if you're a system thinker, you don't think that you have a car because you want to have a car. You have a car because you want to go in a fast or an efficient way from point A to B. That's the reason for having a car. So if there would be great public transport, you would not have a car, because then you just take the bus or a train or whatever to go from point A to B. So that, I think, is our, let's say, social innovations instead of only technical innovations. In summary, so we need the fundamental change in the DNA of the businesses. So not making the existing one greener or more social, the CSR. Again, I'm not against it, but I don't think that that will be the final solution. But we really need the system change. I give you some examples of alternative business models, which is the cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives, steward-owned businesses, social enterprises, fair trade enterprises, and more. I think you have to see where you are and in which context you are, but I think that is, for me, the solution. A little bit more about us, the fair trade enterprises. So as I said, we are a network of fair trade enterprises. We also verify them, so that means that they can get a label if they are compliant with the 10 fair trade principles. Those are the 10 fair trade principles. They're quite obvious, I would say. I mean, I think it's common sense to kind of comply with those principles. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not always the case. Fair trade is not just bananas. I have to say that, because when I start to talk about fair trade, people start to talk with me about coffee and tea and bananas. So that's why we made this text to say, well, we are not Fair Trade International. Fair Trade International is a certification company that certifies commodities, and then the commodity can go to the world market with a better price for the farmers, etc. But what we are doing, and we have a common history, I mean, in the past, I mean, we were kind of together, but we went our own way, let's say. We're still working with them. I mean, it's not a problem, of course. But just to say that we are indeed verifying the whole business, not the commodity, not the product, but the whole business. This is the WTO label. It's not so visible yet, I think not so known yet, but it's getting better by the day, I have to admit, because also we are trying to find markets that are outside let's say, the fair trade niche, which is in Europe, the world shops, and etc. But this is the label, so it gives visibility for our members in the market, internationally and domestic. It's a holistic label of the whole supply chain, including the business governance. We do have a monitoring system. It's called the GS system. It's guarantee system that we are having. I'm not going to the detail that, you can all find it on our website, but it monitors the members and to check if they're compliant with the standards and the principles of the 10 fair trade principles. It's not a simple checklist. It's very important to say that for us, the label and the GS is an instrument. It's not the objective. It's an instrument also for our members to guide them towards to become a fair trade enterprise. So we are also in the global office, we're also kind of consultants for them to see, okay, if you can improve there and there, this is what you can do or whatever. So it's not a kind of, okay, we are not a kind of police office where we check if everybody is doing the right thing. That would be more the certification schemes. I mean, with a lot of external auditors and checking and field visits, etc. We do field visits. I mean, we do have external auditors, but it's every 4 years. It's not every year. And I think even our auditors are using common sense. So if there is a reason that, let's say, a member is not compliant with something, if there is a real good reason for that, it can be the context or whatever, because every enterprise is working in a different context, then we can accept it as well. So it's also a common sense verification, but still, of course, I mean, the basics should be there. We are also on political movement, so we do have our campaigns, we are doing our advocacy work as well, and that is something that I'm quite keen on, that we are also representing our members as private sector. As I said, I was quite active in all kinds of UN processes. I was representing the NGOs. Now I'm in the major group of business and industry. They still see me as the mole, but I don't care. Because I think it's absolutely necessary that we are there as private sector. Because we are private sector. We are not charity or something. We are not an NGO. All our members are making profit. Yes, the big part of the profit goes back to the environment, social issues, etc. But nevertheless, we are private sector. So I think that it's good that we are also representing ourselves as a business association and not as a kind of development association or whatever. We just also built the Environmental Solution Hub. I'm representing it here because I think it's also interesting for you. You don't need to be a member of WTO. It's open for all enterprises, SMEs, social enterprises, whatever. It is free to use. It's an AI-generated hub. This is the link. I don't know if if the PowerPoints are distributed as well, but if not, I think if you Google for Environmental Solutions Hub WFTO, I think you will end up on that link. And that is a hub where, SMEs can upload their, let's say, solutions that they see for environmental problems, and others can make use of it. You can use it in all languages, so you can use it in Turkish, you can use it in every language, because it's also having the app on the chat GPT, whatever. Don't ask me all these technical issues, but I mean, it's working. So if you have a very practical question, well, where do I find an alternative for my plastic packaging? Then you receive the answer. And if everything goes right, you also will find the addresses where you can buy it in your region if you say where you are. I think it's a very practical hub. So it's indeed time to raise the voice of all the alternative business models. We need to build a new economic system. We need to rethink the societies, our societies. We need to respect diversity. I think it's really important when we work with like-minded organizations, networks, that we respect that they are having maybe a different focus. But in the end, we are all with the same final goal. I think that's very important, that diversity is also very important in our social movement. Stop the human-made system of active enrichment and impoverishment, dismantle the centers of power and decentralize it, I think, and then some more. I think this is very important for social movements, that we are working together with the same and a common objective. And there, indeed, I think this is what you often see. Everybody wants to change, but I think we need pioneers, and I think they're here as well. I think one of the pioneers that I see is indeed also the people from working on the human rights, degrowth. I think they are really pioneering in pushing for the progressive change that we want. But I think it's also very important to stay positive. And I see a lot of youngsters that are getting anxious on what is going on. But I think it's also interesting times. I do see the crisis. I do see the triple planetary crisis. I do see the wars around us. I do see all that kind of things. But I also think that it's very important to stay positive, because I still think and hope, but I think what they say, being optimist is a moral duty, and I'm trying to do that. But I also think that indeed we are in a period of change. The old economy is indeed falling down, is falling apart. I think that is happening. You see that happening. And the new world is born. And that, of course, gives a lot of reaction for the vested interest to do things. The reason why we have now this kind of populist governments, extreme right governments, for me, but maybe it's wishful thinking, is a temporal thing. I really hope, and I think that we are able to kind of get back to our common sense again and be, let's say, the humans that we want to be, and that we all together are indeed able to build that new era, the post-anthroposophic era. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ms. Rijnhout. I'm sorry, but we're out of time, so I won't be able to take any questions. But if you have any...
I'm sorry.
I think you could ask your questions in the break to Ms. Rijnhout, if she's okay with it.
There will be the panel discussion, so I think most of the things will come back.
Yeah, so we have a 15-minute coffee break before our next session with Amanda Kiesel. And in Cinema Room A, you could join a panel on fair trade enterprises where Leida Rijnhout will be a panelist. Thank you.